It was March 29, 2016. Inside a holding cell at Gujarat jail, a man sat quietly as the clock ticked toward his execution at dawn. A doctor entered the room for a final physical assessment. He measured the man's weight and wrapped the tape tightly around his neck. These weren't routine checks. Every measurement was being used to calculate the exact physics of death to ensure that when the moment came, the hanging would be perfect. Outside the cell, his family waited for their final goodbye. They had already prepared for his burial. For them, this wasn't just another day, it was the end. That man was Iqbal Ranjha. By this time, he had spent more years on death row than he had ever lived as a free person. But his story didn't begin here. It began 22 years earlier, when he was just 16 years old. Iqbal was a teenager living in the quiet district of Mandi, Bahauddin, Pakistan. Like many boys his age, his life was simple. He had dreams, a family, and a future ahead of him. But everything changed the day a robbery took place in his area, a robbery that ended in murder. The police were under pressure. They needed answers. They needed someone to blame. Iqbal Ranjha was arrested. At just 16, he suddenly found himself facing the full power of the state. He didn't fully understand what was happening, but the charges against him were severe: robbery and murder under Section 396 of the Pakistan Penal Code, a charge that carries the ultimate punishment. The trial moved quickly. Without a strong legal defense, and with the system moving against him, Iqbal was convicted, and then came the sentence. Death. For a teenager, it wasn't just punishment, it was the end of everything. Years passed. Then in 2003, a small ray of hope appeared. The victim's family decided to forgive him. They signed a reconciliation agreement, a razi-nama. In many cases, this means freedom. But not this time. When the agreement reached the court, it was rejected. Under Section 396, the crime was considered non-compoundable. This meant that even if the family forgave him, the state still had the power to carry out the punishment. Forgiveness meant nothing. Iqbal was sent back to the death cell, and the waiting continued. Days turned into months. Months turned into years. But instead of breaking completely, something changed inside him. He began to rebuild himself. Inside prison, he continued his education. He completed his studies, passed his exams, and tried to give meaning to a life that was slowly slipping away. He turned toward religion. He spent long nights reading the Quran, reflecting on his past, his fate, and the life he might never live. Meanwhile, outside the prison walls, his family suffered with him. Because as Iqbal later said, a prison sentence is not just served by the prisoner, the entire family serves it. Years passed like this, until finally, the day arrived, March 2016. His execution date was set. He was transferred to Gujarat jail, where he was placed in a special death cell, an empty room designed for one purpose: to wait for death. His final meeting with his family took place. It wasn't a visit. It was a goodbye. They cried. They prayed. They said things that no family should ever have to say. And then, just hours before his execution, something unexpected happened. A stay order arrived. 15 days. Just 15 more days of life. For someone standing at the edge of death, even a single day is everything. But this wasn't just luck. A human rights organization had discovered something buried deep in the case files, a medical report. A report that had been ignored for years. It proved that Iqbal Ranjha was under 18 at the time of the crime. He was a minor, and under the law, minors could not be executed. This evidence had been there all along, but no one had acted on it. Not for 22 years. The case was taken to the High Court. This time, things were different. The judges reviewed everything carefully: the medical report, the age records, the law. And finally, the truth was acknowledged. Iqbal Ranjha was a minor. His execution was stopped. After spending 22 years behind bars, most of it on death row, the prison gates finally opened. He stepped out into a world that had completely changed. Technology had evolved. Life had moved on. But for him, time had stopped the day he was arrested. He had entered prison as a boy and walked out as a man who had lost his entire youth. Yet, despite everything he had suffered, he did not choose anger. He did not choose revenge. Instead, he chose a different path. Today, Iqbal Ranjha works to help other prisoners, especially those who may be innocent or wrongly accused. He fights to ensure their cases are reviewed, so that no one else has to spend decades waiting for justice that never comes. Because his story is not just about one man. It is about a system, a mistake, a delay, and a life that was almost taken before the truth finally came to light.